Hello, I'm Sue Quinn and I'm going to cook something really delicious from my book, Cocoa. Now, you might think that the world doesn't need another chocolate chip cookie recipe, and I thought I couldn't write a book about chocolate and about cocoa without including my version of this American classic. So this one is made with brown butter, banana and tahini. It might sound like an odd combination, but it actually works beautifully. Really, really delicious cookies. The first thing we need to do is make the brown butter. In chefy terms, it's called beurre noisette, and it's really just melted butter cooked on so that the milk solids in the butter start to caramelize and you get this absolutely amazing nutty aroma, and it really, really comes through in the cookies. You have to hold your nerve when you're making brown butter because you think it's going to burn or you think it's burnt, and it's not. It's just turned a really deep brown. It's really good to use a light colour pan because you can see as the milk solids turn brown, there'll be little brown flecks in the bottom of the pan. And if you use your favourite cast iron lumber, which means a lot to you and cooks really beautifully, but is a bit battered at the bottom, you probably won't be able to see the process as it happens. So in order not to burn it, if you can, use one of these. But gradually, as you keep going and swirling, you'll see the butter turn from yellow to a lovely golden and then to a dark brown, and use your nose because you can really smell as this is happening. So once you've reached your brown butter point, we need to cool it and pour it into a bowl of a stand mixer. If you're using one, just into a bowl that will take the heat if you're doing it by hand or with electric beaters. And make sure that you get all the lovely brown bits as much as you can from the bottom of the pan, because that's the lovely caramelized flavoursome bits, and they'll come through in your cookies when you get to making them. So that's just going to sit in the bowl of the mixer until it's cooled slightly. I've used two different types of flour, plain flour, and I've also used spelt flour, which just adds a depth of flavour, it really does. Then we're using baking powder, some bicarbonate of soda, a half teaspoon of salt. When you're cooking with chocolate, you really need to add salt, just rounds out that flavour. Soft light brown sugar and some white caster sugar or granulated sugar. And I'm just going to get a fork and whisk that around so that it's pretty much already combined when the brown butter goes into it. I'm going to sit that aside for a second. So now I'm going to chop some chocolate, and I'm not going to use, the little morsels that you put into chocolate chip cookies, because we want these to be chunky. We want to have big chunks of chocolate that melt. I'm just going to roughly chop this. This is 280 grams of chocolate. I suppose you want most bits that are roughly the size of your thumbnail, and I've suggested 70% cocoa solids. I probably wouldn't go lower. I wouldn't go to a 60% because that just means there's so much extra sugar. So you might end up finding that your cookies are too sweet. You could do this in a food processor. If you blitz it and pulse it, it can work, but doing it by hand is probably the best. And we're going to incorporate that into all the dry ingredients. Hopefully they'll be evenly distributed in the cookie when they're finished cooking. Now we're going to add some extra things to the brown butter, and the first thing is going to be a banana. So I've suggested in the recipe that you use a black banana or an overripe banana, and that's because the flavour is so much more intense and works much better in this recipe. If you don't have an overripe banana, just put an ordinary banana into a 180°C oven. Keep an eye on it. This took about 10 minutes, I guess, for the skin to turn black, and that achieves basically the same result as taking a banana that's over-ripened in the fruit bowl. And you can see that it's all delicious and soft. I'm just going to mush that down, and that's going to go into the bowl with the brown butter. And then I'm going to add a splash of vanilla and a large egg. And then, I'm going to take the bowl off to do this, the tahini. And some people get a bit weird about putting tahini into sweet things. I think they think it's something that only goes in dips and things like hummus and what have you, but actually it's just crushed up sesame seeds, so it works beautifully in desserts, adds just lovely rich flavour. Make sure your tahini is runny. Sometimes when you get to the bottom of the jar it goes really hard, and that probably won't work so well in here. So find yourself a new jar or give it a good stir. I'll pop 80 grams of tahini into there. That's 81, that's fine. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to beat this for a good few minutes and you'll see the colour change. So it'll turn from like a dark brown from the dark butter, and as it aerates, it turns really pale, and you'll know when it's ready because it's turned pale. Hold your ears. Great if it turned on, wouldn't it? Lovely. Electrician. Okay, that's looking gorgeous. It's pale and creamy and smells amazing. So what we're going to do is, combine the wet and the dry ingredients. I'm going to add half the dry ingredients first, because we don't want to over stir this. We don't want to beat the mixture because the cookies might end up tough, and we do not want tough cookies. And then the second half, just going to fold and stir until all the dry ingredients are combined and you can't see any flour left at the bottom of the bowl, which is where it always lurks. Okay, and once that's done, I'm just going to put this in the fridge to chill for a couple of hours. Okay, so we've chilled the dough, the cookie dough, for 2 hours, and it's really lovely and firm. Now you can get all geeky about why the chilling is necessary. In simple terms, it means that Cookie the dog is starting to bark. We might have to hold fire for 1 second. And the doorbell. Lovely. Being in the fridge means that the butter, the fat in the cookie dough is hard, and when it goes into the oven, it melts more slowly than it would if it was at room temperature, and the cookies won't spread as much. So I'm going to scoop generous tablespoons of this out onto a lined baking tray. And you don't have to be neat, because the more texture, the rough around the edges the lumps of cookie dough are, the better. I'm going to leave a good 5 centimeters or so, a couple of inches space between each of the cookies to give them a little bit of room to spread. You'll have to cook these in batches because the baking tray doesn't accommodate them all. Okay, so I'm going to pop these into the oven, which I've preheated to 170°C or 340 Fahrenheit. And they take about 12 minutes in total, but I'm going to set the timer for 6 minutes so that I can turn the tray halfway through so that they're evenly cooked. Yeah, they're looking really good. They're a little bit brown at the edges, and you might think that they look a little bit too soft in the center, but they're not. They're cooked. Before they cool completely, a little bit of salt, because salt and chocolate are just a match made in heaven, really. And we're going to leave those there for 5 minutes and then carefully transfer them to a wire rack to cool completely. Yum. Okay, that's my brown butter, banana and tahini chocolate chunk cookies. I better see if I can find any children who want some. Hello? Cookies?